What was the research about?
Madam, the research was about multitasking using information technology, IT.
Okay, multitasking using there's a certain word they use, hedonic activities. What does that mean? Hedonic activities, especially multisensory activities that involve touching, listening, and watching. So what specifically were they talking about?
So, as hedonic activities, I'm getting hedonic activities basically it means the tendency of human beings to quickly resort to things that would give them happiness, that would kind of improve their life. That's why it's associated with leisure. If you read the article to the very end, and if you read paragraph one of the article, that's how we also find those activities that are normally associated with hedonic, such as listening to music, watching videos. You can as well include playing video games. So it's something that gives people resort to it because it gives them that peace of mind they need when they're spending their leisure time. That's how I can explain it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. That was good. I think that was a good explanation about what he means by hedonic activity. So when we refer to IT, we're not necessarily meaning all IT, because not all IT gives us multisensory activities or hedonic activities. So we'd be thinking about things like smartphones, tablets, things which allow us to have these multisensory activities. Now, why do the research? What was the point of doing the research?
I think the point behind doing the research, the authors behind the research later realized, as they are living their life, they later realized that people have later embraced multitasking or have embraced technology and have forgotten about their health activities. And in so doing, they have continuously passed it on to the young generation as this thing is adopted. And we've seen that when you read the article to the very end, you see its associated effects, which are negative. And the negative effects that come along with multitasking are irreversible. The moment you're affected by them, I think it's the end of you. So they're trying to urge people to put away or get ready with their phones and find other ways of spending their leisure time rather than spending them on phones and all-rated stuff.
Yes. I think even Derek, to add on to that, think about being on WhatsApp as you're driving. Yeah, think about it. I'd also pose this to the rest of the class. Think about it. Yeah. What would happen if a person is driving and is accessing WhatsApp at the same time? What would happen? You can easily cause an accident. Not so?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm just going to share the screen for the rest of the class because only Derek is responding. I want you to look at, first of all, the research question. To what extent does IT-related multitasking influence hedonic experience? Does this effect vary according to individual traits such as personality? So now I also want you to look at, those are research questions. I want you to look at these statements. These are referred to as hypotheses. Look at that statement.
Excuse me, madam.
Have you looked at, sorry?
Excuse me, madam.
Yes, please.
See the screen.
Are you seeing the screen?
No, madam. I'm not seeing the screen.
Okay, let me try again. Can you now see the screen?
Nothing I'm seeing, madam.
You still can't see?
Now I am seeing.
Okay. So you see that statement, which I've highlighted. And all of you see that statement I've highlighted?
Yes.
Yes, madam.
What does that statement mean when you read it? What comes to mind?
Let me give it a try.
Yes, please.
I think this statement means that such multisensory hedonic activities tend to connect the participant with the environment around him. Take an example, if you're listening to music and probably if it's slow music, there are higher chances of you sleeping off because this music is directly connected to your brain. The brain listens to it and the body responds accordingly. And sensory activities, take an example, playing football. Obviously, you won't sleep when you're playing football. So they could differ in such a way. That's how I can explain it.
Mm-hmm. Did we understand what the multisensory hedonic activity meant? We're talking about IT, that which is in IT. The multisensory activities that we carry out in IT, like accessing WhatsApp, playing video games, so on and so forth. So we first of all put the context in which we're discussing them. What does emotional violence mean?
Madam, would I possibly say the variations in like the way you feel about something?
Yes, they create more
You
positive.
may say positive or negative.
Yeah. And then we know what a unisensory activity means. So this statement, so the multisensory activities, hedonic activities like touch screens, like touching, playing games that using like WhatsApp, which allows you to use the touch screen, listening to music, playing video games, that they generate a more positive emotion. That means the happy feeling, the feeling of enjoyment is more with multisensory hedonic activities than unisensory activities. Those that need one activity, like for example, reading emails or typing out your assignment. That's a unisensory activity. Okay. So now this is what we refer to as a hypothesis. It's a statement which needs to be proved or disproved. Proved or disproved. So it says a multisensory hedonic activity generates more emotional violence compared to a unisensory activity. Do we remember what we discussed about research the first time in our first lecture? That it involves testing 2 or more variables. And then a hypothesis, which involves proving or disproving a hypothesis, the quantitative research. This is typically a hypothesis. So we have the multisensory activity and the unisensory activity. And we want to prove whether the multisensory activity generates a more emotional valence compared to the unisensory. So in other words, at the end of this research, these researchers had the objective of proving or disproving this statement. And their research output would be proving or disproving this research statement, or rather this hypothesis. Do you remember discussing hypothesis last week?
Yes, madam.
Okay, so this is a typical example, and this is what these researchers are trying to do. They also have a second hypothesis here. These hypotheses were derived from this first research question. Those hypotheses were derived from that first research question. To what extent does IT-related multitasking influence hedonic experience? Okay? So that is essentially, those are the 2 things that I wanted to point out about research. Now, we have only heard from a few people. I wanted to hear from others what they thought about this paper. Gerald, can you tell us what you thought about this paper? Gerald, can we hear from you?
Yes, madam.
Yes, please.
I think this paper will be conducted on research.
Pardon?
I'm making a research book. Will be conducted on this, making research.
Sorry, I've not got you.
I think that will be on making research and making research books.
You will make research books.
Yeah.
What did you think about the article? Joanne, can you tell us something about what you thought about this article?
Wow, madam, by the time you started to teach that article, I wasn't present.
But you read it. I didn't teach it, you people read it. And you put comments.
I am just seeing.
So you haven't even made a comment on Moodle regarding this article?
Just I was not yet enrolled. They have just enrolled.
Just today?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, can we hear from Brian Agumya?
Yes.
Yes, can you tell us what you have?
Yes, so what I managed to get from the authors on this article was that they were like trying to talk about, they were specifically on the multitasking phenomenon as far as IT is concerned, but they were bringing out both the negative and the positive, like the beauty and the cancer of this. How have we termed it? Is it hedonistic, whatever, like whatever madam has been explaining? And like, how should I say? For example, the authors, like, I'm sure they had it, according to what I read, they had it in mind, like to bring out these daily interferences, the people of this information age, because they term this one as the information age, people from this information age that they have to deal with every day as far as the IT is concerned, like that, like, I won't say it was a hypothesis. I think they concluded well in a way that they managed to bring it out that a person who is more, let's say, like sensitive or self-conscious and maybe unstable at emotions, like, okay, the whole idea was in your leisure time, try to be careful. Like madam has put an example of driving. Maybe you may be driving at a road, maybe let's say, and you don't expect anything. So you're like, what's wrong with texting while driving? But you never know what can happen. So I think they were just talking about the beauty and the cancer of the information age, something that's so.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Brian. Okay. I thank you for those who took time to read through, especially Derek. Thank you for that effort. One of the key points of giving you an article such as this is for you, first of all, to see what IT research is doing out there. For our dissertations, we shall be implementing systems. You shall be designing and implementing systems. Now, one of the most important things is to understand, although this is what is required of you at undergraduate level, it's for you to understand this is actually not research in itself. Building a system is not research, but it's bringing forward new knowledge. Now, for example, if we go back to the article, I'm going to share my screen one more time. Some of these things we shall discuss them a bit more in detail. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, madam.
Now I'm reading from the abstract. The abstract is kind of a summary of a published paper. They start by saying, multitasking with IT may impact how much pleasure people experience during hedonic activities, especially multisensory activities that involve touching and listening and watching. Then they point out, however, past research on IT multitasking has primarily focused on utilitarian professional contexts. That means they simply wanted to prove that maybe using WhatsApp gives people pleasure, playing video games gives people pleasure. But the research did not show to what extent that pleasure comes in. To what extent doing that pleasure, carrying out, doing these activities, this carries in. For example, you saw the first hypothesis. It says that carrying out the multisensory activities gives more positive emotional valence than a unisensory activity. That means it was actually showing there's a greater show of pleasure, a greater production of pleasure when you are carrying out these multisensory activities, yeah, than if you're doing a unisensory. So for example, if I am playing a video game, I'm touching the screen, I'm listening to music, it gives me more pleasure than if I'm typing an assignment or a document. It gives me much more pleasure. Now, the point they are trying to point is that all past research just focused on utilitarian professional context. That means it simply showed it gives pleasure, but not to what extent. That's the past research. Now, their research was closing that gap by showing to what extent, how much more pleasure it gives. Okay, so that demonstrates a research gap, and that's the gap they were closing. Okay, significant, that's the gap that they were closing. So this is just to show you what IT research could actually look like. Although this is not what you will do, your research is going to be building a system for a particular context. What I would urge you is go beyond just building a system, but maybe at the end of designing the system and implementing it, find out if it does actually bring about the improvement you sought out to bring about. That's what I would say. Go beyond just building a system, but implement it and carry out an evaluation. That's what I would say. Two, the other important thing when we looked at what research is, why do research? One of the things it says it answers real world problems. Now, you look at this research, it points out that doing these activities actually gives more pleasure than a unisensory. A research like this can be used by lawmakers. For instance, if they are putting up a law saying, do not use your phone while driving. A research like this, because it proves beyond reasonable doubt that it can be a distraction. If something is giving you pleasure, it can give you a distraction as you're carrying out an important activity, like for instance, driving. So research like this can actually be used by lawmakers to insist on certain laws in a country or in a community. I hope I'm making a point here about some of the things
Yes,
we
madam.
discussed. Yeah, these are just some of the things we discussed earlier. Okay. With that in mind, I would rather we stop here because we are a little bit ahead of everyone. If we continue, we may skip everyone else, but I wanted us to, let's just have this discussion so that next week we start on, we continue on the nature of research. Is that okay?
Okay, madam.
Okay, so I wish you a good week, a good evening and a good week.